Okay, good morning, everyone. JC Thomas here, Assistant Director of Development Services. Joining me today, Kelly Charles, our Chief Building Official, and Donna Dorsey. They're going to be explaining our new program for professional certification for office tenant improvements. Kelly, welcome, and I think I've given you access as a co-host. So you have full control along with Donna, and we also have Dave Slifka, who's our training supervisor, who will be helping out as well. Just a couple of notes as we get started. Feel free to use the chat throughout the session. We'll be monitoring that, and we'll be taking opportunities to address any of the questions you might have. We're also going to have this webinar available on our website within 24 to 48 hours. We'll record this. And then lastly, if you do need to ask a question, go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll call upon you toward the end of the session. This is going to be a discussion about the new program, along with a live demonstration on how to apply for the professional certification. So with that, Kelly Charles, you want to take it from here? Uh-oh, Kelly?
Sorry, it muted myself for some reason.
Ah.
I don't know why. Let's see. All right. Let me get to the bulletin and share it. So first of all, I want to thank everyone for joining us for this exciting new program presentation. You can see my screen now for the information bulletin. JC, can you confirm that?
Yes.
Can you see the bulletin?
I see
Okay,
bulletin
perfect.
150. Yep.
Great. It doesn't do that nice highlight in red like Teams does. All right. So very excited to present this new program. This has been a team effort working with the industry and also with our staff and our inspectors and our reviewers to make sure it's a successful program. So without further ado, I'm going to go through this information bulletin. This information bulletin will go live tomorrow, which is September 1st, along with the affidavit that goes along with this. This program will begin tomorrow. So just want to go over the criteria for this program and what the program entails. So basically, this is professionally certifying for office tenant improvements that all of the codes and standards have been met for this submittal, and there's certain criteria. So the intent of this is to streamline the issuance of qualifying building permits by having the designer of record certify their compliance with the codes and standards. So here's a list of the qualifying projects. So these are Group B per the California Building Code, interior office tenant improvements that are less than 20,000 square foot in area and no change of use or occupancy. So this would be any office tenant improvement. It does not include laboratories due to the hazardous materials. It does not include restaurants, classrooms, or other occupancies. It must be designed by a licensed architect or an engineer. Also, it cannot be a first generation tenant improvement. This would be a building that was never suitable for occupancy. Typically, when we permit a shell building, it may not have bathrooms, it may not have ductwork, it may not have all of the requirements, and therefore it's not eligible for this program at this time. The space must have been entirely built out or received a certificate of occupancy. So we do not issue certificates of occupancy for shell buildings. As a part of this program, you would not be able to alter, remove, or add any plumbing fixtures. And that is due to the fact that we do need to evaluate your water and sewer capacity fees and potentially provide an invoice for that. There are no deferred submittals allowed. However, if you have sprinklers and fire alarm, you would just submit those at the time of your building permit application. The idea is that you submit everything all at once. You, and I'll go over this later, but you set up an appointment and your project's issued same day. The deferred submittals will be reviewed. The fire alarm and sprinkler deferred submittals will be reviewed. However, those will be on a fast track on the rapid review. No changes to the exterior portions of the building, including window modifications or replacements, or any changes to the exterior facade. This is the only way we could get out of the requirements for historic review when it's 45 years or older. Obviously, we wanted to include those into this program. You must not alter or change stairways or stair vestibules. This is to avoid issues with smoke control or egress. You cannot include any new floor openings. This would have some effects on structural design and also potentially smoke control. We are allowing a small amount of structural calculations for the equipment anchorage. This could be mechanical or electrical equipment. These calculations would be required to be stamped by a licensed engineer, and that would be a structural engineer or civil engineer. No new hazardous materials can be added to the building, including energy storage systems. You might call it a BESS system, basically batteries or what we call UPS systems or uninterruptible power supplies. This is due to the requirements for hazardous materials and the fire department triggers for requirements for review. Obviously, you can never reduce accessibility in any way. So if there was a ramp, you cannot remove it and put in stairs or any other reductions in accessibility. No special inspections can be required because we were trying to minimize the scope of these projects. However, we will allow special inspections for the anchorage of the equipment that you did provide your calculations for. And obviously, like all projects, it must comply with all federal, state, and local codes. All right, so the submittal requirements are very similar to all of our other submittal requirements. So if you are submitting fire alarm and sprinkler affidavits or plans, you would submit those as forms. The hazardous materials reporting form is always required, project contacts form, stormwater checklist. Um, and then this will be the new form, and I'll go over this in a second. It's the professional certification of office tenant improvements. This will be an affidavit. It will be signed by a licensed architect or an engineer. I will correct that. And then the San Diego Regional Hazardous Materials Questionnaire is always required. Your plans would comply with the submittal requirements. These should be 100% construction documents. Obviously, they're not getting plan reviews, so there is nobody doing quality control. You need to make
Hello.
sure they are 100% drawings.
Hi.
Yes, do you mind holding off on a question until I go through this information bulletin? Thank you. All portions of the project must be submitted at the time of building permit, including fire alarm and sprinkler plans. And then the structural calcs would be signed and stamped by a licensed engineer. And then the scope of the work. This is important. You want to make sure that the scope of the work does state that you're requesting professional certification for office tenant improvement programs. This is not a required program. So if somebody does choose, and I've had people reach out to me that would prefer to have their plans reviewed, even though they meet the scope. So that's why we want you to include that in the scope of work. The online application we'll be going over shortly, but you'll see that process. But there's a checkbox that you select. I do have to note that if it is a designated historic property or a parcel located in an adopted historic district, it will require a historic review. That will be the only review required, though. Submittal requirements, we'll go over that, but you would choose the building permit with plans. The fees, note that we are not charging a plan review fee because we are not performing a plan review, but there is a small administrative fee. And then the other fees that we are required to collect, including records and administrative fees. And inspections, a pre-con meeting, which is a pre-construction meeting, will be added to your project. This is so that you can have your contractor meet with our structural inspector prior to starting construction. Then they can make sure that the scope of work meets the qualifications. What we do not want you to do is start your project and then realize, oh, you changed your occupancy from a B to an A. You've added a very large lecture hall, for example, that does require a plan review, or you're adding retail or a restaurant. So there will be a pre-con meeting that the structural inspector will be able to go through your plans and walk through and see if there's anything critical. Also, if there's any code issues, we can discuss those at those times. If the inspector does determine that the scope of work does not qualify for this program, they will require your permit to be canceled and you will need to submit plans to be plan reviewed. Now, if the inspector determines that the work does not comply with the adopted codes and standards, they will do their correction notice just like they do for any other project. And depending on the severity of this deficiency, they could either require a construction change or a new permit. If it's egregious and no codes and standards are being adhered to, obviously they would have that right. However, most likely we will handle most of these with a construction change. And these are the references. So I see that there's some questions being asked, and before I go over the affidavit, I'll just answer some of them because I think we can go through. Do all engineers qualify? An electrical engineer would not be able to stamp architectural plans and accessibility plans. So you'd have to be for that discipline. So the electrical engineer would be able to stamp their electrical plans, but the architect would be stamping the architectural plans. These documents will be posted to our website tomorrow morning. Can I clarify plumbing fixtures? Plumbing fixtures are any fixture with a water connection. So that would be any faucet, sink, toilet, water fountain, and such. Um, do Group B labs apply? No, these are Group B offices, and that's why it specifically says office. Now, if you are a lab building that has office space within it and the whole area is office space, then you would qualify. Do new ceilings trigger special inspection? I would defer to Chapter 17 of the California Building Code. All right. Special inspections for sprayed upon fireproofing in type 1 buildings. Um, Most likely, if this is an existing building, there was already sprayed upon fireproofing on the structure. So if you're just doing a replacement of it, potentially, this would be something you'd want to talk to with your inspector at the time of your pre-con. It would most likely be replacement. If you're adding new structural members in a type 1 building, most likely you will not comply with this program because you would have to provide structural calculations. All right. Please confirm that this is applicable to City of San Diego projects. Um, this is a DSD, which is San Diego specific. I cannot speak to other cities and if they would allow to use our program, but this is for the City of San Diego only. Can the pre-con meeting be planned prior to self-certification? No, that wouldn't be possible because we would have no way of scheduling that inspection. However, what we'll show you is how quick and easy it is to apply for this. But if you have any questions about the program limitations, you can always email or send a question to us. There's also the option to do a preliminary review if you're not sure if you do comply with this. But I believe most of the criteria is pretty straightforward. Do certified interior designers qualify? They do not. No, this would be architects and engineers that are registered in the state of California. I see the stair requirement, but what about if you have changes to rated common corridors? That will be acceptable. So you can change a corridor, you just cannot touch the stairs, the stair vestibule, or any floor openings. Would the required construction changes go through plan, check, or self-certification? As I said, that is at the discretion of the inspector. If it's a minor detail, most likely it will not require a plan review. However, if it does have more detailed requirements, we potentially could put it into review. But the idea is if it meets the criteria of this program, most likely it will not require a plan review and it will just be updated plans. Can you go over the submittal requirements, please? I will put in a, Dave Slifica, if you could put in a link to the project submittal manual, section 2, that would be great. It's a pretty large manual and it goes through all of the submittal requirements. And potentially if at the end I have time, I can go over that. Um, but right now we're trying to focus on this, and that would be for all projects. Can you move existing plumbing fixtures as long as we do not add or remove? Unfortunately, not at this time. It would be very difficult for our inspectors to verify that these are relocations and not added fixtures. Potentially in the future, we can look to expand this program if we see that it is successful and our inspectors are comfortable with that. All right. So I've gone over the information bulletin. Now I'm going to go over the affidavit. I will answer the rest of the questions after that. So this affidavit is a statement of certification that your project complies with all of the requirements that I just went over. So by completing it, the licensed architect and engineer declares that the scope of work meets the limits of the program and that the work depicted on the construction plans conforms to all adopted codes and standards. So obviously you put your project name, your tenant name, your suite address if you have one, and the job address. Um, you certify that it meets all codes and standards, and all of the criteria we just went over. It's only a B office space with no change use or occupancy, 20,000 square foot, no first generation TI, no plumbing fixtures added, removed, or altered, no changes to exterior facade, no deferred submittals, and no changes to the stairways. No floor openings, no accessibility changed, no new hazardous materials, no structural work besides anchorage, and then no special inspections besides anchorage. The next part is actually really interesting. So for everybody that doesn't understand how DSD actually does the reviews, for your project when it gets set up, our setup staff actually inputs your original fees for plan review. However, your reviewers are actually putting in your relying on our design professionals to add this information into this form so our issuance staff can issue it and have the proper fees. Our inspectors are going to verify this, so please be careful. So number one thing is you would put in the total area of work proposed for this in office tenant improvement. So, 15,000 square foot. That's how much area you're affecting. The valuation, our staff calculates that for you. This will be required to be calculated. There is a link to Information Bulletin 101. It shows you how to calculate this. This is a requirement of the state for us to provide a fee to them for a variety of fees, including a seismic fee. That is a requirement of state law. And then the construction and demolition debris deposit, there's a fact sheet here that will give you that information. Now, for your mechanical fees, your mechanical reviewers currently do that for plan reviewed projects, but you would be responsible for adding this. So non-residential tenant improvement, the square footage of coverage. So if you're changing all of your ductwork and it's 15,000, you would just put in 15,000 here. And then if you're adding some air handlers, how many units you're adding, how many fans you're adding. It's basically a cafeteria plan. So they would charge the fees based on this information. You're adding a mini split, you'd put that in there. VAV boxes, number of units. Currently, this is what your reviewers do. Similarly, with electrical fees, you would put in how many circuits. And if you're adding any conduit in J-box, so you do 2 of these, maybe you have 15 new circuits. The fees will be calculated based on these numbers. So what is important is providing us accurate information. If your inspectors determine that you've added more than you've put in your fee, they will add or refee you. All right, so the designer professional, this is where we get this information. So you'd provide your designer name, your architecture license, and the engineer license. So depending on if your project has an architect and an engineer or just the architect, you would put the both informations in. If you have two designers, you can put both of them in, but most likely a project would be either designed by an architect or most likely. And then you put your name in and you certify it meets all the requirements. During inspections, if any portion is not to comply with adopted codes and standards, the inspector will require the applicant to submit a new permit and a plan review will be required. And then there's a signature for the design professional. Um, so this is it. I will go through the rest of the questions and then we will do the demo. All right, so where was I at?
I can help you out with the questions, Kelly. Would
Oh,
plumbing
that would be
fixture
great. Thank you.
alterations include replacement for a new fixture of the same type at same location?
No, that does not require a permit.
Okay. In terms of floor openings, does this also include adding electrical boxes into the floor?
No, that would be a recessed. So as long as you're not penetrating the floor slab.
Can an A3 use be included as log as long as it does not exceed 10% of the overall area as a non-separated occupancy?
No. A3 occupancies are not included in this. That's an assembly use.
New suspended ceilings using anything other than the 2-inch wall angles require special inspections per their ICC report. Unfortunately, no inspectors seem to understand what they are to specially inspect. I see this eliminating a tremendous number of projects. This is the only jurisdiction that I am aware of that requires the ceiling special inspections. Will this be addressed in some way?
I can look into that. I'll talk to our inspection team and see if they're comfortable with including that in the program.
What would you consider first generation TI? If we have a TI in a portion of a shell building that has received occupancy permit, is it considered first generation?
So if the portion is shell, then it did not receive a certificate of occupancy. So you can see our information bulletin 190 that talks about what a shell permit is. Typically, a shell does not receive occupancy. If you did receive occupancy in that space, then it's not a shell building.
Do the MEP plans need to be individually certified by these engineers?
This would be based on the Board of Professional Engineers requirements. So if you're required, if the scope of work does require MEP engineer to stamp those plans, then it would be required. So I would follow the state licensing requirements.
Is there a contact for asking additional questions about the program after this meeting?
Yes, you can contact me and I can put my email in the chat.
So a through floor poke through electrical device disqualify this from occurring?
No, that's a through penetration. It's not a floor opening. This would be something that requires either a shaft or creates an atrium or a stairwell.
How do you address changes after acquiring permit?
As I said earlier, it would either be a construction change if it's a minor issue. It would be with no plan review. If it's a major issue, it potentially would have a plan review. And if it's outside the scope of this program, it would require a new permit.
Okay, and I'm just going to double check if you already answered these questions because someone mentioned that we might have missed a couple. Did you go over deferred submittals? How are FSP and FA handled?
Yeah, so in the information bulletin, my screen is a little frozen right now. You would be submitting those. They're not deferred submittals. So deferred submittals are not allowed as a part of this program. You need to submit them at the time. So no deferred submittals. All items must be submitted at the time of building permit. Projects with fire alarm and sprinkler systems will have expedited reviews for those permits as those systems cannot be professionally certified. You would need to submit them at the time of building permit.
Can plumbing be submitted as a separate permit?
Um, you can submit a separate project at any time. That would be plan reviewed. It would be a plumbing and plan permit with plumbing.
Is ceiling hung anchorage included in the program?
Are you asking if you can provide structural calculations for ceiling hung anchorage? You can unmute yourself if you'd like.
Sean, go ahead and unmute.
Hi, hi. Thanks. You know that the anchorage for equipment is exempt from what's included in the program. So I'm wondering if you have to hang like HVAC unit or something like that from existing ceiling joists, would that qualify for self-certification, or do you have to submit through a regular process?
That would be included as long as you provide structural calculations by a structural or civil engineer that are stamped.
Is there a weight limit to it?
No.
Okay.
You would just need to provide structural calculations.
Thank you.
Just double checking if you answered this. How do you address changes after acquiring permit?
That would be through the construction change process.
Design build MEP plans are not created by licensed engineers. Do these plans qualify in the program? If yes, who would be certifying these sheets?
the licensed architect.
Once the application is submitted, how long would it be before we get approval to continue with the TI project, assuming all parameters are met?
So as soon as you submit your application, you will schedule an appointment for setup. Typically, those appointments are available in 1 or 2 days. At that time, they would go over through your application and hopefully issue it that same day.
If we have small restrooms, can this be a construction change?
No, this program does not include restroom tenant improvements unless you're just relocating the non-load bearing partitions and not affecting any of the fixtures.
Okay, that's all the questions for now.
All right, great. Donna, do you want to give a demo of how to submit these applications?
Sure. Okay.
All right, I'll stop sharing.
Okay. And I will share my screen. Okay. Everybody knows what this looks like. This is when you log into our ACA, our Excella online permitting. And this is our test environment, but this is what it's going to look like on tomorrow morning when you apply for these type permits. So I've logged in and I've clicked apply for a permit and I get the disclaimer as usual. So there's going to be very little difference as you're applying for these permits. You're still going to apply for a building construction permit. And then you're going to verify whether you have an address or not. You're going to input the address or the assessor parcel number. One or the other, and less is always better. You can enter any unit numbers here. And continue. Code enforcement question. So far, everything is the same as applying for a building permit that does get a review. I'll show you the one thing that is different. Here on the scope, you'll say professional certification for office tenant improvement. 15,000 square feet and the rest of the scope. This is timeline. This would be standard because we're not expressing these. You're not getting plan review anyway. Applicant type, authorized agents, and any discretionary approval number if there is a prior discretionary, and then you continue. Is this an application for a no plan permit? No. And is this for a final only or completion of work? No. And continue. Oh. Type of permit. These are all building permits. This is where you would say what additional permits you are requesting: electrical, mechanical, plumbing, if electrical and mechanical, if applicable, your fire alarm or suppression. And that you would include those drawings with your plans, if that's applicable. And here, are you requesting active project management? No, these don't get managed. Select submittal type. This is general. All of them will be general. And here's your unique question. Is this application for professional certification for an office tenant improvement? And we'll say yes. This is going to trigger the affidavit to be required at upload. So we continue our application. The rest of the standard questions come up. It wants to know if there's a discretionary permit, new plumbing fixtures, you must add no there. Structural calculations, yes or no, if applicable. Truss calcs, no. Geotech, no. Is this residential development? No, because it's only office. Residential use, no. Storage racks, no. Child care center, no. And this last question, no. And when we continue, The system is going to ask you about historic. You will say no, that is not a designated resource, and you will provide the year that this structure was built and whether it's 45 years or older, but we're not doing anything on the exterior. So we will continue. And based on how we answered the questions, it knows what documents are required. So here's our affidavit. We'll upload our affidavit, our building construction plans, which would be plans for the full scope of what you are applying for, fire alarms and fire sprinklers included. Hazardous materials reporting form. And our stormwater applicability. So our documents will upload. It'll go to the next screen, which is optional documents. So if you have anything else that you want to upload, you can upload it there. These are the ones that are required, and the next screen is optional. There was an issue with uploading documents this morning, so this may not go through, but you'll see based on the questions that it asked, there was only one question that was different, and that was the question about the professional certification that you would answer yes to, and it would trigger this affidavit. And once this gets submitted, it would go into the queue. You will have made your appointment and you'll show up for your appointment. Staff will go over it, set it up, add the fees, get the required DS 345, which is the project context information form. If you have that ready, you can always upload that on page 2 of your documents as an optional document, because you know it will be required for issuance. So you can provide it up front so that they don't have to ask you for anything further. This does not look like it's going to go through, but as you can see, there was very, very little difference for the traditional tenant improvements that do get a plan review and these that are professionally certified.
Thank you, Donna, for the demonstration. Appreciate that. So basically, the only thing that gets triggered when you check that box is this new affidavit. Everything else would be status quo. You would be uploading any affidavits for sprinkler or fire alarm at this time as well, and if you had structural calcs. I see a couple extra questions asked in the chat. Can I explain again why plumbing fixtures cannot be included in this program? When you add, remove, or alter plumbing fixtures, we need a water meter data card, and we potentially will need to either adjust your water and sewer capacity fees. That does require a review. We do that on behalf of Public Utilities Department. So it would trigger a review, and this program is intended to have no reviews. It's trying to issue the permit same day as much as possible.
Will this process require pre-approval by APCD via hazmat application?
Yes, all building permits do require the county hazmat form, and that's why it was included in the list of required documents as well.
Do we need to bring plans to the appointment to pay fees?
All of our submittals are electronic. There is no need to bring any paper plans, and all of our appointments are virtual. I will actually show you how to schedule a virtual appointment for setup and issuance for this program as well after this. But basically, you would just sit at the appointment with the virtual assistant that will walk you through the program, ask any questions, set up your project, and issue it. At that time, all of our payments are done electronically as well. You can come in. We do have a cashier at our building too.
What are the fees and how are they calculated for this program?
The fees are contained within information bulletin IB 501 and IB 103 for the mechanical, electrical, plumbing fees. As I showed you on the affidavit, it did have a worksheet that you would input the fees or the amounts that we would calculate the fees based on.
I'm a manager of a small motel. I do a lot of drywall and painting. Does this require a plan?
First of all, that's not subject to this program because a motel is a residential occupancy. Painting does not require a permit at all. A drywall replacement for due to damage can be subject to no plan building permits. And you can see our information bulletin 203 for information on that.
Per the bulletin, the program is being promoted as being able to get a permit same day. It also notes you must request an appointment. What is your anticipated timeline for scheduling appointments? Current appointments at the city have been running 2 to 3 weeks. Will same-day appointments be available?
The appointments are not same day, but they are not 2 to 3 weeks behind. I will show you how to schedule an appointment right now. So you can show you. So basically, when you submit your plans, you would then schedule your appointment. Let me share my screen. So this is our home page. You go to schedule an appointment, book a virtual appointment, and you go to project setup. And it would be a building permit with plans. After you submit your plans, you schedule this appointment. It brings you to our booking page. And there's an appointment available on the 6th, which is, and Monday's a holiday, so that would be 2 business days from now. So at that point, your project would be issued. Is there any other questions? Okay.
Yeah. What is
Mhm.
the percentile forecast of the applicant's usage of ProCert building permit versus building plan rapid review projects?
I can't answer that question. But we will find out once we have the submittals. Probably in about 2 weeks from now, we'll see how many projects have been submitted.
How about verification of accessibility statement signatures? What would the process be if the statement was missed?
That would be handled at the pre-con with the inspector.
Does the project need to have ADA compliant restrooms and path of travel based on the current code to qualify?
It would need to comply with Chapter 11B of the California Building Code as required by this affidavit and statement that you comply with all codes and standards. There are requirements for existing buildings, and you would need to comply with those requirements. But we do not enforce ADA at the city. We enforce Chapter 11B of the California Building Code.
The special inspections portions really needs clarity. There are numerous instances where special inspections are required by code. Do these requirements eliminate projects from the programs, or is it left up to the field inspector to flag?
From talking to our inspectors and also our plan reviewers, the only ones that they saw would be most likely would be the equipment anchorage. I will look into the ceiling, suspended ceiling requirements. However, all other special inspections would most likely be exempted from this program. They would not be qualifying. Some of those require review of, typically those require calculations. But if you have a list of them, Miguel, you can send it to me and I'd be glad to look at them and see if our inspectors would be okay with including those in the program in the future.
Do fees need to be paid to schedule appointments, and can they be paid at the time of application online?
The fees do not need to be paid at the appointment. What they would do is when you apply, you actually pay no fees. Once your appointment is completed, they will send you your invoices, and at that point, you could pay it at any time.
If there are corrections, what is the turnaround time?
Corrections at your point of submittal and issuance, Rebecca? You can unmute yourself if you have a question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So yes, what happens is typically if you're in these appointments, hopefully you can make that correction at that same time and re-upload those plans so your project could be issued at that same time. If you need to go back and get a signature or you forgot to do the county hazmat form at that point, then there would be corrections required. We are very caught up with setup and issuance, so there should be very little delay.
If the project needs restrooms, can these be shown as future spaces and a separate plumbing permit be submitted for this?
If your building does not have restrooms and it requires restrooms, then most likely it's a shell building that did not receive occupancy and would not be able to qualify for this project.
No other questions.
All right, well, these are really good questions. I'm definitely going to look into the special inspection. I look forward to receiving any comments. I believe my email was put in the chat. It is kecharles@sandiego.gov. I'm really excited about this program and hopefully it'll be successful. You have a hand raised, Ian? I'm sorry. I don't see it. Feel free to speak, Ian.
No worries, all. Thank you very much. I'm still unclear about the pre-con meeting and what it means when there's required changes in the field. I mean, someone, I'm not saying my clients, but someone could put together a really haphazard set of drawings with this. And what if there's a bunch of issues at pre-con and you said construction changes, but does that now mean a reviewer is going to review a set of plans for a construction change they've never seen before, or what's the level of review on that?
So, first of all, I will tell you that the mayor's office has told us if somebody is egregiously misusing this program, we can exempt them from this program. So obviously we want to encourage people to give us 100% drawings. The pre-con inspection is required. The work will be verified. If the inspector determines that the scope of work is not consistent with the limits, then the pro cert's canceled. So if you're outside of the scope of work, there is no, you're stopped and you have to resubmit for plan review. However, if there's minor issues, they find a code issue, they can trigger the construction change. Those will be set up by our DPMs that are in the field office, and they will just replace the plans and they will not require a plan review. If the inspector is uncomfortable with a portion, then they potentially could have a plan review. But if it's within the scope of this program, most likely no plan review will be done. Does that answer your question, Ian?
Yeah, I think so. The rabbit hole gets deeper on things, but I'll have to take that answer into account. No problem.
Yes, obviously the intent is 100% drawings. Our inspectors will be meeting with me on a weekly basis to tell me if we have any bad actors. We will be looking at potentially meeting with customers that are submitting incomplete plans or outside of the scope because it does waste our services.
Kelly, going back to the adding of the restrooms, there was another portion to it. The building has occupancy. However, we have ATI that adds restrooms. So that was clarifying the question above.
Okay, well, you can submit the building permit with plans with a plan review for those restrooms and then submit the pro cert. But if you're say the floor does not have restrooms and it doesn't meet the minimum requirement for number of fixtures on that floor with this TI, then obviously our inspector would have an issue with that. If it's just additional restrooms that are not required by code, which is I find very rare, then this would be okay.
I don't see any other questions or hands raised at this time.
All right, great. Well, I think my email has been put in there a couple of times. It's kecharles@sandiego.gov. It looks like the bulletins are already posted, so you can take a look at them. Starting tomorrow, you can submit, as Donna showed you, and great. There's my contact information too. So hopefully this will be a successful program. Honestly, we want to continue providing great customer service. Hopefully you'll see some marketed improvements in our backlog due dates. I can tell you that almost all of the review disciplines have said significant improvements in backlog and timeframes for plan review. And this program will only hope to help that out by minimizing what we review. If this is successful and everybody does comply with the requirements and our inspectors are comfortable with the program, hopefully we can expand it in the future. But that is a partnership between us and the design professionals and your contractors. So please make sure to comply with all the requirements. What we do not want is work to be done that does not comply with this program, and then we have to stop construction, because obviously stopping construction is never what we want to do. So please, if you're unsure of something, please reach out to us and see if you meet the requirements. I see there's a hand raised by Tyler Grant. Yes, Tyler?
He had put something in the chat. Do condensate lines constitute plumbing?
If it's a condensate line for a HVAC unit, then no. All right. Well, I want to thank you all and thank for our team for DSD. Please know that this is a partnership for all of our reviewers, our setup staff, our IT group. We developed this program in a month, and it's also our inspectors. So understand that our inspectors are very valuable, and they're the last people that are going to see this project. So I really want to give a big shout out to them being willing to open their arms to this new program. It is a big step for them, and we are excited to launch this, and hopefully it'll be a very successful program. Thank you.
Thank you.